So welcome, Judith, to the Confucius Institute for Scotland and the University of Edinburgh. We are very pleased to have you here for a short conversation about the importance of Chinese language teaching in schools and across Scotland. Perhaps I can ask in the beginning, about the history of all these ideas. When did you start thinking about the importance of Chinese language teaching, and how did this all come about over the years?
I first became interested in the teaching and learning of Chinese language and culture in schools when I became a head teacher in England in 1987. And I felt then that the curriculum had to be modern and up to date. And it seemed extraordinary to me that there was so little interest paid to China. And I felt it was important to learn the language, but also for young citizens to know about Chinese history and culture, and as many of them as possible to have access to this. So I managed to get a teacher of Chinese into my own school, and people started learning the language and we had lectures. But there wasn't enough interest in England at the time. It was strange. But when I came to Scotland in 1994, there was so much more interest in China. And so I managed immediately to set up a Chinese centre at St George's, and people were very enthusiastic about it, and it was warmly greeted by the language teachers of other languages as well. And so we started teaching Chinese to non-native speakers, and obviously there are Chinese elements in other parts of the curriculum. And gradually that developed. And once we passed the millennium, I think there was a huge interest in China everywhere, and a growing consciousness of the Chinese place in the world in terms of its vibrant economy, but also, I would argue, in terms of its vibrant society and its very, very rich history and culture, which goes back for over 2 millennia. So in 2006, the Scotland-China Education Network was founded. And the point of that was to bring together people who were really concerned about introducing Chinese language and culture into Scottish schools and making it, if possible, available to every young Scot.
Well, the Scotland-China Educational Network has become a very important location now for bringing people together and trying to implement various ideas of promoting Chinese language teaching. What do you think has changed over the past years that this has become such a successful initiative with so many people participating in it?
Well, there are so many different areas in which people are interested in introducing China into our schools and our universities and colleges, and also making the study of the language available to people who want to work in China, to businesses. There's so much interest generally in that, and to understanding more of Chinese society. I think the big thing that's happened is that the major national educational agencies have really seized China. And now there are language examinations in Chinese languages, Mandarin and Cantonese. The first ones took place this year, and already there are 82 entrants for national qualifications. So that will continue to grow when higher and advanced higher examinations are introduced next year. But there's also a whole huge interest in Chinese generally in the curriculum, and making it a cross-curricular interest so that people are able to study Chinese culture as part of other subjects, find out about the geography of China, find out about music and dance in China. But I think it's very important that the language itself is embedded. And what I would certainly like to see is that Chinese is a language available for non-native speakers from primary education onwards. So it takes its place among the languages that young Scots learn.
Well, talking about the students or the kids side of the whole endeavour of introducing Chinese language teaching, how do they respond to the new curriculum and to Chinese language learning itself?
Well, in primary, at St George's, Chinese starts in primary 4 and continues throughout, and it becomes a language option when students get into the upper school. And they find it very exciting. It's taught in a very lively, interactive way. They actually enjoy learning the characters, they enjoy learning to speak the language, and they do actually make good progression in the language. We have had a research study done to ensure that that was actually taking place, and indeed it is. I think when it gets to the examination level, Chinese is more daunting because it is so different for a non-native speaker than obviously European languages. But the Scottish Qualifications Authority are very open to discussing the format of the examination and to learning from the experience of candidates. So what I hope is that the challenge will naturally remain, but the enjoyment of learners will continue as more of them begin to take examinations.
I mean, it's not introduced into very many schools yet in Scotland as part of the formal curriculum. What would you advise how to start?
I think it has to be very carefully thought through. If you want to introduce Chinese as a language into your school, you can't just do it by an order. You have to engage the staff in thinking about the language and what it would mean to the curriculum. And obviously it's very important to engage modern languages teachers. They mustn't see that they're being forced out for a new, cool language when fewer people are taking their own. So they must be engaged in the whole process. And I think that's very important because languages are not good in Scotland. We don't have a strong enough take-up of languages. Introducing a new language, looking at new ways of teaching and learning, all the excitement of that can actually have an impact on the take-up of other languages. And people begin to realise, because of the interest in the study of Chinese, that languages actually have a huge part to play in the education of young people and in their life opportunities later on, even if it's only part of what they do. If they have some fluency in languages, then it will assist them in university life and later on in employment.
If we look into the future, like looking ahead into 10 years' time, what would be the ideal situation for language teaching or Chinese studies teaching in Scotland for you as one of the pioneers starting it all up?
I think the great advances in Chinese teaching in Scotland have come very much through international partnerships. And Learning and Teaching Scotland has signed a memorandum of understanding with Hanban, which is the Office of Chinese Language Teaching International. And that partnership has proved very fruitful. So already now there are 20 teachers of language in Scottish schools. Some of them are language assistants, some of them are probationers, and some of them have actually qualified. For the first time, we have teachers of Chinese who have qualified in Scotland to teach the language, and I believe that's very important. And it has been developed, particularly through the initiative of Professor Kay Livingston, who has started a series of Confucius Classroom hubs. Confucius classrooms are supported by Hanban in the same way that an institute like the Confucius Institute for Scotland at the University of Edinburgh has been supported. And they are meant to focus on the teaching and learning of Chinese language and culture in schools. But Professor Livingston's idea was to have the schools actually as hubs, so that a school which has a Confucius classroom shares its resources and its competences with schools in the area, both primary and secondary. And already 8 have been opened in Scotland, and it could be that 2 more will be opened soon. What I hope that we may see in 10 years is that more and more schools will have access to the resources of these hubs. Perhaps more hubs will develop, but that we spread the interest in the teaching of language and culture, we develop the number of teachers, and perhaps in 10 years' time it really will be accessible to most of our young people. That's what I would hope.
Well, in terms of curriculum of excellence, where would you see Chinese language teaching or modern studies on China as positioned within the curriculum framework?
Chinese language teaching and the teaching about the history and culture of China has a huge role to play in curriculum for excellence. The point of curriculum for excellence is to give our young people the skills they need for the modern world. We need to be innovative in the way that we implement it. Introducing something new like Chinese language and culture frees people up from the constraints of the courses they've run in the past. It means that everybody is a learner. The teachers in the school are learners. It's exciting to find out about China. Chinese culture is vibrant and interesting. Chinese people are characterised by their friendship, by their work ethic, by their determination to improve their own society. We have so much to learn from contacts with China. And I think as a curriculum for excellence is implemented, the teaching and learning of Chinese language and culture has a huge part to play in freeing us up and enabling us to be very open in our approach to learning.